So feminism, which you've already enlightened me a bit on, you really, really are against feminism. Before I let you do your piece, now my sense is that feminism, at least the way it started, was that women wanted equality. They wanted the same equality of opportunity that men had. There is no doubt that most of these roads in our society have been easier for men. I think you would argue that that's changed now. Yep. But so what do you think of the feminist movement? You were just kicked out of the Amber Rose Slut Walk 2 days ago.
She was in your studio
She was
today.
here today.
I'm so sorry we didn't run into her.
She was here
I would
today.
have given her a piece of my mind.
Why would you hate feminists?
Well, the picture you paint is perfectly accurate, or at least it was until perhaps 10, maybe 15 years ago. So only recently. It's changed very recently. I think most people instinctively agree with the equality of opportunity and equality of access for women. They want women to have the opportunity to do anything they want, to rise as high as a man if they're prepared to work as hard and put the same amount of hours in. And of course I agree with that. I think everybody agrees with that. That's not what modern intersectional third wave, as it's called, feminism is about, which seems to me, and I think to a lot of women too, primarily to be about man-hating. It is a very angry, bitter, profane, lesbianic sort of feminism that
but
does not
don't they
like
have a
men.
right to be angry, though? I mean,
about what?
As the other.
About what?
Well,
do you think women are an oppressed class in America today?
that women don't make equal money as men. Often,
But the wage
often
gap's
in
a
the
myth.
same job.
The wage gap is a myth.
Is that a myth? I mean,
of course it's a myth.
We hear about this all the time.
Yeah, of course it's a myth. It's one of those feminist myths that won't die. Right. Basically, if you take all of the earnings of men and all of the earnings of women and you do a simple bit of maths, then you'll get something like a 77, right? What this doesn't take into account is the different choices that women make. It doesn't take into account a variety of factors. No reputable economist takes the wage gap seriously, but it's repeated because we saw where the stuff comes from just this week. For Slut Walk I was kicked out of. A journalist for Time magazine reported that 15,000 people had come out in support of this Slut Walk. I was there. It was maybe 250. She blathered. She started to sort of blame other people, and eventually they changed it to thousands, but it was still wrong. This sort of sloppy ideological reporting, and I'm sorry to say that the most brazen untruths always come from the left, just like most of the major plagiarism scandals come from the left, because they believe in narrative over fact. This is how Rolling Stone happened. The fake rape in Rolling Stone. It's how Duke Lacrosse happens. It's how all of these things happen because these liberal journalists believe that even if this one's not true, it's a really important thing for us to talk about.
Right. So I'm with you on that, because even with some of my prior guests like Sam and Majid, I mean, this is what they've done.
This is what they experience.
I'm with you on that part.
And they're getting the receiving end of it. These memes of whether it's 3, 4, or 5 women. 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 women are going to get sexually assaulted on campus, which is just nonsense. Whether it's the wage gap, which is nonsense. These things become established as part of they become almost folkloric, and they run up to the president. I mean, Obama repeats some of these statistics, but they're not true. And if you look at the work, for example, of Christina Hoff Sommers, I mentioned earlier, at the American Enterprise Institute, who very crisply and cleanly and entertainingly debunks this stuff.
I'm working on getting her on the show.
Well, she's great, and you should. I mean, she takes a scalpel to these guys, and it's clinical and brilliant to watch it. None of this stuff stacks up. So if you're trying to make the case that women have a right to be angry, that they should be angry because women have all of these injustices, well, I ask you, what are these injustices? And every single one that's given by feminists, every example that's given by feminists does not stand up to scrutiny. Women are not an oppressed class in the West. There is no rape culture in the West. We don't celebrate rapists, we put them in prison. Women don't earn less than men for the same work. That's illegal. It is true that, because women are mothers, there are consequences when you get into the workplace on that. But a woman is paid the same work as a man. So when you say there's confusion between wages and earnings. When you say 70 cents to the dollar, what women hear is, well, I'm going to get paid 77 cents for a man's pound. No woman has that experience. It doesn't happen. There are some women who work part-time because they have children. Well, they have children. What do you expect?
Right.
The important thing is that we make sure that when women come back to work after they have children, that they're not disadvantaged for that. Now, where that's happening, that's wrong. But it is not a problem on the scale of what Sam Harris and Majid will talk about, happening to women in the Middle East.
Right.
And feminists will never talk to you about this difficult stuff because they don't want to be put in the difficult position of having to rank Islam versus women.
Right. So that's where I'm totally with you on that
Western
part,
world,
because it's a Western Eastern.
Western world, Western feminism, complaining about mansplaining, this constant this constant message that men are evil and broken and wrong, toxic masculinity. This is offensive, it's irritating, it is wrong, and it's destructive.
All right, so let's go right to that. You wrote a piece this week about the shooter in Oregon.
Yeah.
And your piece basically was saying that men are being abused in the media or are so easily dismissed in society that they're acting out in crazy ways, and we have to stop treating men like that. And I know a lot of people on the left, for a lot of the reasons you're describing, will read something like that and say, you know, this is nonsense. Men have all the power. Yeah,
I mean, what I said was that at least part of the reason that some of these young men are acting out, that we have these shootings happening, at least some of the reason for that is the horrible position we've put men in. Now, you can read every day in major new media publications that there is a problem intrinsically with being a straight white male, or just being a white man, that somehow that gives you privileged access to certain institutions, that you are somehow problematic. That's not the experience of young men today who go through university and are 1 in 7 of them, who put on Ritalin or Adderall because they are held up to female behaviour standards. It's not the experience of boys.
Well, I don't know if there's a direct connection between the medication and the.
Well, of course there is. Of course there is. Behaviour, not beauty standards. Behaviour standards. Of course there is. Because
behaviour standards. Okay.
Behaviour has standards. I meant behaviour. Behaviour standards. And we're not just doing that, but we're also changing the way that exams are marked to make them easier for women, because women don't test well in exams. So boys are struggling. Boys are falling behind. And this is not a controversial thing. Everybody knows this. Boys are falling horribly behind girls in education. Fewer men are going to university. More women graduate. Women get higher grades. In the workplace, for example, a Cornell study from 2015 showed that women have a 2-to-1 advantage going for the same job just because everybody is desperate to hire women. The experiences of men growing up now do not reflect these horrible headlines about straight white men. And frankly, I think progressives have got themselves into a really weird corner. They don't seem to appreciate the irony of criticising somebody for their skin colour and their orientation, but they do it anyway.
Right, and they would say, well, this is the group that's in power, so if they're being...
Well, they would wrongly claim that there is a sort of mystical force in society known as the patriarchy. And what these feminists will claim is that the patriarchy is responsible for keeping women down. And all of these crazy expressions like toxic masculinity and whatever flow from this tired old ideology about male power and all the rest of it. Now, as Camille Paglia, the wonderful dissident feminist critic, says, you know, if society be left in the hands of women, we'd still be living in mud huts. Thank God for the patriarchy. It's the patriarchy that got us to the moon. It's the patriarchy that built the internet. It's the patriarchy that built this floor and the ceiling. Women didn't want to do that. It's the patriarchy that drives oil trucks and steeplejacks. You know, women don't want to do that stuff either. We're perfectly happy to complain about gender representation when there aren't enough women, when there aren't enough women in a particular subject field for our arbitrary quotas, but we don't make it the same complaint the other way around.
Right, but men were the ones that were going out and hunting, and women were taking care of the home. So I find that argument's a little flimsy because...
Well, no, there are people who say that's not a bad way to structure society. I mean, when we start to break down those gender... Look, this all comes from this sort of discredited leftist idea that gender is socially constructed. And if gender is socially constructed, right, if you're taught to be a boy or taught to be a girl, rather than having a lot of that behaviour genetic, a lot of behaviour sort of encoded in you, if you like, as a virtue, by virtue of your chromosomes, if gender is a performance and it's a social construct, there's no reason why girls can't behave like boys and boys can't behave like girls. Now, we're beginning to start to see that fall apart now. One of the ways in which it falls apart is the transgender debate. We know now progressives are telling us that people can be born with the wrong brain. If you could be born with a female brain, there must be such a thing as a female brain. So surely, you know, femininity can't be a social construct. Make your bloody minds up.
Yeah, one of the things that drove me crazy on this was that, you know, everybody was saying that, or most sane people, I think, were saying that obviously Rachel Dolezal couldn't choose to be black. She was white, and she pretended to be black,
This is another... She was created by progressives who said that blackness was a performance, that you could... that blackness was a social construct, that race was... No, that race is a social construct. Of course it isn't. You know, we know now, because we have the computer processing power to do it, we know that, you know, when we look at the genome, that there are clusters of information that map onto certain geographies. In that statistical sense, we know now that race is real. And, you know, we know from... Ordinary people know from the common sense of our eyes and our ears, you know, we know that people look different and behave differently. We know that stuff. But progressives, for, you know, a variety of balmy reasons best known to themselves, have been claiming that gender and race are social constructs. All this stuff is starting to fall apart now.
Is the gender one falling apart? I don't want to belabor this point, but
well, the gender one's falling apart.
Do you not believe that people can be trans? Because I know some trans people. I have no doubt.
I didn't say that. What I said was the transgender debate's very interesting and very dangerous for progressives, and they haven't yet dealt with this. If you can be born with the wrong brain, if you can be born a man with a woman's brain, that means there's such a thing as a woman's brain, right? So what transgender patients will do is they start hacking away at themselves to make them, anatomically more like women. So they're, somewhere between the two genders by the end of it, right? They're not functioning women, but they look a bit more like women, and some of their, some things work a bit more like women, and they have the appearance of women, and they say they have a woman's brain. If you can have a woman's brain, there is such a thing as a woman's brain. It means there's a biological basis for certain behavioural differences. Now, you were asking me about sort of men going out to forage. It may be no bad thing that we let men be the hunter-gatherers, and women may indeed be happier focusing on bringing up children and building a home. Certainly, the women that I know that are in their 20s that have been told, or especially in their 30s, have been told they can have it all, they can have a career. They're living in a horrible apartment they don't like with a cat. They're miserable, they hate all their friends, they're not happy people. Well, they've been encouraged to be single, encouraged by feminism particularly to look how they want, sort of this fat positivity that is another feminist trope. It's like you can look like what you want, your self-esteem shouldn't depend on what a man thinks of you. Well, yes, it should, because if you want to, settle down with a man you'll like and have a nice, happy life, there are certain things that men like in women, like stay thin, and you may not like it, but it's a fact.
Right, but
as gay men, we know that men are visual animals, right? Now, some guys like fat girls, but not many. And if you're listening to feminists who are telling you can grow blue armpit hair and you can burp and fart and swear, you can be Lena Dunham, this disgusting, quivering mass of horror, and that men will like you, that's a lie.
Right. So
men will not like you, and you'll be alone and you'll be miserable.
I think a lot of people here are going to say, well, this is sort of somehow, this is some of your gay rage or misogyny coming out in some of this stuff.
Why would it be misogynistic? I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if you're thin or fat as a woman. I won't want to fuck you either way. I don't care. What I want is for people to be happy. And I see people not being happy because I see that women are moving in a very, very dangerous direction, told lies by wacky far-left feminist crazies who want to control other people because they're hurting inside, I think, in many cases. Very often it's 30, 40-year-old, bitter old women trying to lecture 20-year-old girls on how to behave. It's an ugly woman-on-woman form of violence, if you like, modern feminism. It is a nasty thing to watch, and I see women get drawn into this, and I find it sad. But there is, of course, one great hope and a silver lining to all this, which is that feminism is collapsing in popularity among women. In just a few years, the number of American women who describe themselves as feminists has gone from 28 to 18%. You can read in Vox, which is not somewhere that would advertise this statistic.
Although that may just be because of the success of the movement, too.
No, this is women who don't identify as feminists, and they don't identify as feminists because they see in feminism what I see, which is it is turned into a bitter, nasty, ugly, man-hating, empty horror show. And frankly, you read these blogs like Jezebel, which rail against men. Most women don't hate men. Most women don't want to beat up on people for being straight or being white or being a male. Most people quite like a boyfriend, So they see they don't have anything in common with these angry gender warriors who want to deny basic human nature and who make claims and give instructions that are almost designed to make women miserable. Yeah. And I think most women recognise that, which is why feminism is falling off a cliff with women.